Ever wondered how we got from finding a hole in the ozone layer to this huge global goal of net zero? Well, in this explainer, we're going to connect those dots. We'll trace the science, walk through the landmark treaties, and break down the key ideas that are literally shaping our planet's future. Let's dive in. So, to kick things off, let's start with a question. How on earth does an environmental treaty from way back in 1987, one designed to fix the ozone layer, have anything to do with our modern goal of net zero? It might sound like a huge leap, but believe me, there's a direct line from that early success to the targets we're all talking about today. But before we can jump into all the treaties and targets, we really need to get a handle on the basic science. It all boils down to a totally natural process, one that actually makes life on Earth possible, but it's a process we've accidentally kicked into overdrive. Yeah, we're talking about the greenhouse effect, and honestly, the best way to think about it is like a giant blanket for the planet. See, our atmosphere is great at letting the sun's warmth come in, but it's also supposed to let the extra heat escape back out into space. The problem is, certain gases are making that blanket thicker and thicker, trapping more and more heat inside. So, what's making this blanket thicker? Well, the main culprit, the one everyone talks about, is carbon dioxide, CO2, which mostly comes from burning fossil fuels. But it's definitely not working alone. You've also got methane from things like livestock and agriculture, nitrous oxide from fertilizers, and even some super potent fluorinated gases from stuff like our refrigerators and air conditioners. And here's a point that is absolutely crucial. Not all of these gases are created equal, not even close. We measure their impact using something called global warming potential, or GWP. We set CO2 as the baseline, right? So its GWP is 1. Well, on that same scale, methane is about 28 times more powerful at trapping heat, and nitrous oxide, get this, it's a staggering 265 times more powerful. This is exactly why the conversation has to be about way more than just carbon. Okay, so with the science laid out, what has the world actually tried to do about it? That brings us to our timeline of international agreements. It's really a story about how our strategies and our ambitions have changed over the years. This whole journey really kicks off in 1987 with the Montreal Protocol. Now, this wasn't about climate change. It was about fixing the ozone layer. But its incredible success at banning CFCs proved that, hey, global cooperation on the environment could actually work. That success paved the way for the Rio Earth Summit in 92, which then led to the Kyoto Protocol in 97, our first real attempt at legally binding targets. And then, much more recently, in 2015, we got the Paris Agreement, which took a whole new approach. Let's zoom in on Kyoto for a second. Its whole model was top-down. It set strict, legally binding targets, but only for developed countries. It also brought in some really interesting ideas, like carbon trading, which basically lets countries buy and sell the right to pollute. But its biggest hurdle? Some of the world's biggest emitters just weren't fully on board, which limited its impact. And that brings us to the Paris Agreement, which completely flipped the script. Instead of top-down rules, it's a bottom-up system. Every single country sets its own voluntary climate goals. These are called nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. The big idea here is that every 5 years, everyone comes back to the table with even stronger plans, all to keep global warming well below that 2°C mark. Now, it's really important to remember that the Paris Agreement didn't just happen in a vacuum. In that exact same year, 2015, the world also agreed on a much broader plan for the future, the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a framework that understands that you can't separate climate action from all the other challenges we face. And it is a massive vision. There are 17 of these Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Think of them as a shared global to-do list for all of us. They cover absolutely everything, from ending poverty and hunger to ensuring clean energy and protecting our oceans, all with a deadline of 2030. So while Goal 13 is literally called climate action, the real genius of the SDGs is seeing how they're all connected. You can't really tackle climate change if you're not also working on affordable and clean energy, or building sustainable cities, or even ending poverty. It's all one giant puzzle. So we've hit the science, the history, and the big global frameworks. To wrap this all up, let's just quickly decode 3 key terms that you hear thrown around all the time in today's climate conversation. Getting these is essential. First up, the carbon footprint. Just think of it as the total climate impact of anything. It could be your personal footprint from how you travel and what you eat, or a company's footprint from all its factories, or even the footprint of a single t-shirt from the cotton field all the way to your closet. Next, we've got the other side of the coin, carbon sequestration. This is all about actively pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The most famous way is pretty simple, planting trees, because they naturally breathe in CO2. But it can also be super high-tech, like using machines to capture carbon right from a smokestack. And that brings us to the ultimate goal, the term that ties it all together, net zero. Now, this is a key idea. It doesn't mean we stop emitting everything completely. It means we strike a balance. For every ton of greenhouse gas we put into the atmosphere, we have to pull 1 ton out. It's all about getting our planet's carbon budget back into balance. So, there you have it. That's the journey. We've gone from the basic science of our planet's greenhouse blanket through decades of global negotiations, all the way to the goals and the language that are driving our actions today. We've basically built the roadmap. And that leaves us all with a final and pretty critical question. We have the science, we have the history of what's worked and what hasn't, and we have a global blueprint in the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. The framework is all there. But are our actions, as countries, as companies, and as people, actually matching the scale of our ambition? That's the question that's going to define everything that comes next.